that tells you that there is something out there.
Pretty hard to spoof that.
Absolutely. Los Alamos, Oak Ridge National Labs, MacDill Air Force Base, Edwards Air Force Base, the remote test site in Nevada, also known as Air Force Flight Test Center Detachment 3. That's the actual terminology for Groom Lake facility.
From what I hear you guys saying, there's something.
I don't know who's building it, who's got the technology, who's got the brains, but there's something out there that better than our airplane.
So it's not us, that's one thing we know.
We know that.
I could say that with a very high degree of confidence.
For someone to try to bust down the walls, it's not going to happen. You'd have to go to all these facilities, get into their vaults, then bring that out as a united coalition. Not one person couldn't do it. It would take a united coalition of acknowledged scientists to come forward with it. Hello, everybody. Thanks again for taking the time to be with me today. I've prepared 5 more cases from the historical archives. And ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to go old school. We're going to take it all the way back to the source. We're going to provide you with the sketches from the actual eyewitnesses, the actual sketches, the drawings, the illustrations, even the sighting maps as well. So that's what we're going to do today. And I want to go ahead and highlight this photo right here. Now, this is the prior location of the CUFOS archive, Center for UFO Studies. That's really started by Jalen Hynek. And this is 2457 West Peterson Avenue in downtown Chicago. This is what it looks like now, tax cutters. But approximately 5-10 years ago, this is the office building in the back, down the hallway. This is where all of the 60,000 private UFO cases were stored in about 18 file cabinets, and plus a huge library of books, kind of an unused research location, which is now part of the David Marler Historical Archives near Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so that's what we're going to be peering into today, the drawings and sketches from this location. And we'll move on to the next sketch here. We'll start with the first one. All right, so this one I was able to dig out of the historical archives. I don't think it's been seen by anyone. This is May 25th, 1967. Castro Valley, California. Set up the scene here. 2 eyewitnesses are on their porch, and it's at night. They're looking off to the west, and they see this red flickering light approach their location. It gets a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and then they see this flame 10 to 20 feet in length coming out of this hole on the bottom of the craft that measured approximately 25 feet across. And what's interesting is the primary eyewitness was able to see this through a pair of binoculars. And when the flame came out of the bottom of it, it backlit the bottom of the craft. And he said that it looked like it had these structural battleship steel plates that were fastened by rivets. That's kind of what he described. So you can just imagine this flame coming out of the bottom, and then the light from the flame is actually showing you and lighting up the bottom of the craft with these multiple rivets and armor-plated steel is the way he described it. Now, when the flame went up inside the hull of this craft, that's when it departed. And so that's the breakdown of our first case today. We'll move on to the second case now. All right, now on this one, this is another CUFOS case, June 11th, 1967. Now, I want to point out that this date of 1967 keeps on popping up again and again and again. And that'll be more important as we move along through these cases here. June 11th, 1967, Montreal, Quebec. And what we're looking at here is a 10-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that has 3 lights, 2 green, 1 red. The whole thing was kind of enclosed in this pinkish glow, and it's 6 feet tall. The primary eyewitness was with a friend. They were driving down the road that paralleled a river near their location, and they saw this emerging from the trees on the right, and it basically parked itself about 150 feet in front of their car as they're driving by, and then this thing sort of was obscured off to the left as it disappeared behind some trees. So again, June 11th, 1967, and that date just keeps on popping up again and again. And again, the reference for this, the source material, is the CUFOS archives, 2457 West Peterson Avenue, now a part of the David Marler collection. We'll move on to the next case here. Okay, so this is a direct scan from the CUFOS archives. August 21st, 1978, Greenwich, New York. Primary eyewitness saw this 150 to 200 foot long, what they described as clear white blue color. It looks like a crystal with two lights on the right-hand side. It made no noise at all. And this thing is 150 to 200 feet long. Who's building these things? This is back in 1978. No visible means of propulsion, no visible flight controls, virtually silent craft. This is all back in 1978. Again, Greenwich, New York. And we'll move on to the next case. Okay, this is a direct scan again. October 6, 1986, Chicago, Illinois. It's in the morning, and this is sighted from the 5th floor window and the intersection of Erie and LaSalle in downtown Chicago. So primary eyewitness is looking out of this 5th floor building, and he sees this craft flying overhead that looks like a cough drop. It's going 100 to 125 miles an hour as it's just passing by. Kind of resembles the modern day Tic Tac UFOs and UAP. So another good case from the historical archives. I don't think, ladies and gentlemen, this one has ever been seen. You can see the text on the bottom that describes it, and I've basically reproduced that so you can see it in kind of a little bit clearer manner. But again, who's building these? Who's flying these? Are they remote controlled? Are they drones? Back in 86, it's already a done deal. And we'll move on to the next case here. All right, this one has got to be right up there with some of the most bizarre, strange, obscure UFO cases. This is June 1st, 1967, Richmond, Virginia, 11:30 a.m. Here's that date again, 1967. Now, I'll set this up for you here. Primary eyewitness was a 7-year-old boy. He's outside, and he's chopping wood with a small handheld hatchet. He's just playing around. All of a sudden, he hears this crackling noise, and he sees what he described as a large or big hubcap falling vertically on edge through the trees. And it was about 13 feet across, about the size of a Volkswagen. Now, when it got about 10 feet from the ground, this thing inverted so that the landing gear are now pointing up toward the sky. About 5 seconds later, this whole craft did a 180 and flipped down so that the whole craft is now sitting on the ground right side up. He got within 10 feet of the craft. That's how close this is. So we'll look at this in detail here. We're going to stay on this slide. And you can see that the exterior color was kind of gray-white. It had this metronome device on top that was going from left to right. This lever that was moving, red light on left and green light on the right. So that's what you can see in the forward view that we're looking at here. You can see these big lights in the forward part. Now, those lights protruded from the craft itself. Now, as he got closer to this thing, he felt this horrible pain in his back, just a terrible pain in his back. And at this point, he basically picked up his hatchet and he threw it at this device. I mean, this is just crazy. The landing gear legs were about 36 inches high. And the next thing that happened is he was shocked by this craft. It made this blinking light type of a maneuver, and then it shocked the primary eyewitness. Now, we'll move on to the next slide. I'll give you another perspective of what this thing looked like. Here's the actual map of where this took place. Again, this is Richmond, Virginia, June 1st, 1967. You can see 3 miles to Route 250, Pump Road, Haves Secondary Road. That's the location. Now, he's got Norton Home as the sketch, and then slightly off to the right, you'll see that little dot object landed. That's exactly where this actually took place. So when you have a detailed 10-page report, you've got multiple sketches, you've got a sighting map to go with the report, we can bank on it. We're looking at something real here. Let's move on to the next one. I'll give you another orientation here. Here's the back of the craft, rear view. Color all jumbled, a mix of many colors, color solid red. Jumbled up headlight size lights inside band. John said They did not appear to be portholes, but gave off a soft white light. So not only do you have the red and light headlights in front, but wrapped around the outer circumference of this craft that looked like a big hubcap were these smaller white lights that had this glowing quality to them. The whole craft did emit a buzzing sound, and we'll move on to the next slide here. Okay, so here is a front view. There was a door associated with the craft itself. Now, if you look at the bottom here, you can see this side view where you have these red and green lights protruding about 3 feet from the side of the craft. That's a very good side view, and it's really important that we have that. Now, what happened next is, once he was zapped by whatever this craft was, he immediately made a beeline to the home. That's when his mother came out of the house. She heard the disturbance and her son just screaming, and she got a real good look as this craft started rising vertically, made that buzzing noise. So not only did the 7-year-old boy see it, but the mother saw it as well. And they went inside the house. They tried to call the police, but the phone was completely inoperative. They couldn't get any signal whatsoever. No phone quality right there. So, and then when this thing departed, they got in their car, they drove 3 miles down the road to a transmission store. And I want to go to the next slide to tell you what she said here. This is interesting. Okay, this is with the mother. "My son has been shot by a flying saucer." Word for word quote, the mother of the primary eyewitness. He eventually went to the hospital, and the doctors were a bit skeptical, but he was under tremendous stress and pain. So in a nutshell, that's this case. And this 1967 date keeps on popping up again. We'll move on to the next case here. All right, now, we've got January 18th, 1966, Naval Ordnance Test Station, 4:55 p.m., Baker Range, Mojave Desert, California. The source material for this is the Wendell Stevens collection. And what we have here are 2 civilian surveyors who, one is in a truck, the other one is down the range on kind of like a test range. He is setting up a 40 times optical telescope for surveying. He's at a monument station, and he notices this strange craft, and you can see this is the original sketch from the report. It's 12 feet long, it's 8 feet wide. If you look at the thickness, it's 1 foot thick and about 3 inches as it tapers back. And if you look on the right side view, you can see this top view with these ridges or protrusions that went along the length of the craft itself. Now, what's interesting is, primary eyewitness who was looking at this, he said that there was a disturbance on the back of the craft as this thing flew by at about 150 miles an hour, no more than 150 feet above him. Some type of shock wave, although it wasn't supersonic, some type of air disturbance or some type of a disturbance on the rear end of the craft. Now, we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. I want to show you what he was looking through. This is a 40 times sighting telescope for the surveyors that they use. He was looking at this thing as it was about a mile down the range. He got a good look at it through this. So it's a reliable report. It's from 2 reliable eyewitnesses. They tried to use the radio to call it into the headquarters, but that didn't work. And then as it flew about 2 miles down the range, it started getting obscure and they didn't see it anymore. Now I want to go ahead and move to the next slide to show you kind of a detailed drawing. So again, this thing is about 12 feet across, 8 feet, you could say that in the width, but the thickness is 1 foot with the ridges that taper back to about 3 inches. And then on the right-hand side, you see this strange disturbance behind the craft. Again, January 18th, 1966. So 1966, 1967, it looks, ladies and gentlemen, like somebody made a breakthrough in technology. It really looks that way because this date keeps on popping up again and again. And if we, and we'll be a kind of a skeptical person here. We'll just take a stab at it. Let's say that these craft are exo-atmospheric. They have the capability of going out of the atmosphere into space. We'll move on to the next slide and see the implications of what that means now. Okay, so if we already had the technology to travel into space without using liquid rockets as early as March of 1966, what was the Saturn V for Why are we using obsolete liquid and solid rockets when we already have this technology? No visible means of propulsion, no visible flight control, only a buzzing noise, and these things take off vertically. There's no rockets, there's no propulsion, there's no jet engines. So again, was Neil Armstrong briefed on this? Yeah, we'll just go ahead and move forward. Yep, go ahead and keep moving forward here. And next slide. Yep. So was Neil Armstrong briefed on this technology when he landed on the moon July 20th, 1969? In 1966, they already had this technology. So this is a 3-year leap even before Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. Was he aware of this other technology? Let's move ahead to the next slide here. Take a look at this, ladies and gentlemen. So you've got 5 of these at 7,700,000 pounds of thrust, and you've got all these pipes, and you've got all these ductworks and pumps and turbo pumps and all these levers and valves. And folks, we're just looking at a lash up here. We're looking, do we really need all this? Each one of these is a single point failure. If there's a failure on any one of these, you can either lose the rocket or the crew, and the rocket or the crew, or both of them. All these single point failures, the cases that we just looked at, this is 3 years prior to, they don't have any of this. They don't have any turbo pumps and all single point failures. It's debatable if there's any moving parts whatsoever. Let's move on to the next slide here. Okay, total combined thrust, 500,000 million pounds of thrust. Is all this really necessary to go into space? That's the question I'm asking. It's something that I think we should really look at this question and just really deep dive and think, have we been played for fools all this time? Is this just window dressing? All these rockets and liquid rockets and solid rockets, it sure looks like someone has made a breakthrough and they just haven't told us about it. Now, let's take a look at the Air Force reaction here, what they do. Now, let's move on to the next slide here. So you can just imagine, folks, that there's some Air Force general right now at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and when a call comes in of a new sighting, you know, he's taking this call here, UFO Analysis Department, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and you can just see the spin wheel here. What is the kind of response that we get? You can just imagine him getting up from the phone in the desk there, spinning this wheel and picking any option that comes up. So we've got hoax, we've got jets refueling, we've got swamp gas, we've got hallucinations, we've got temperature inversion. So you can see how the government always tries to make this prosaic explanation and explain all this away, but folks, these cases will not go away. We have them a part of the historical archives. We're not going to let them get away with this because these cases stand alone. We've got the eyewitness reports, we've got the sketches, we've got the maps that go into this, and there's literally thousands of these that predate the UAP Tic Tac case. And I want to thank you for your attention. We're going to continue to grow this channel, and we're going to maintain an important part of our national history. Thanks again for your attention.
And that tells you that there is something out there.
Pretty hard to spoof that.
Absolutely. Los Alamos, Oak Ridge National Labs, MacDill Air Force Base, Edwards Air Force Base, the remote test site in Nevada, also known as Air Force Flight Test Center Detachment 3. That's the actual terminology for Groom Lake facility.
From what I hear you guys saying, there's something.
I don't know who's building it, who's got the technology, who's got the brains, but there's something out there that better than our airplane.
So it's not us. That's one thing we know.
We know that.
I could say that with a very high degree of confidence.
For someone to try to bust down the walls, it's not going to happen. You'd have to go to all these facilities, get into their vaults, then bring that out as a united coalition. Not one person couldn't do it. It would take a united coalition of acknowledged scientists to come forward with it.